When you listened to Powell today, when you saw the dots, is it clearer than ever that Jay Powell has finally embraced the idea that without slowing the economy to the point of recession, pushing up unemployment, and giving up all hope of a soft landing is necessary? That's what he has to do. That's what they have to do now to finally bring down inflation.
I think that's the core of it. I don't think he would say that he's completely given up the idea that we could get out of this with at least something that's softish. I mean, if you look at the projections, they said the unemployment rate is only going to be 4.4%. I think that's still much too sanguine. I think it's probably going to go beyond 5%. So I think they're being a little cautious now in making their forecasts. So I do think there is likely to be more pain. Is it necessary? Not 100%, but it's getting close to that.
Well, let's look at the dots, Randy, because what's interesting isn't just that they moved the rate that they expect to get to next year to 4.6 from 3.8. Just 3 months ago, that was their expectation. Look at the dots. You've got 6 along the top, up almost at 5, and then you've got 6 along the bottom who are closer to 4.4. Then you've got the median guys in the middle, and lately we have found that it's been the more hawkish dots, the more hawkish people on the FOMC who have led as we went forward. So you're in the camp, you're in that 5% federal funds rate camp. Why? And do you think that everyone is going to end up there next year, or even higher?
I think they'll most likely be in sort of 4.5% to 5%. I don't know if they're actually going to get to 5%. Really depends what happens with inflation, in particular core inflation. One of the challenges is that the biggest piece of core inflation is so-called shelter services, and that's mostly through owner equivalent rent. So that means rents play a very big role once you strip out food and energy prices, and rents are going to be slow to slow down. A lot of places are still catching up on rents. Some markets, there had been prohibitions on increasing rents, and they're just being relaxed now. So you're going to continue to see a lot of pressure in core PCE. And so I think that's going to drive the Fed to continue to raise rates and then keep rates up. I think they want to keep rates above at least core PCE for quite some time, and that's why they're going to be in the 4.5%, 5% range for much of 2023.
Randy, when you were listening to Chair Powell today, did you notice any change in messaging? Because what was interesting to me, even when our markets reporter was talking about how investors are finally realizing that this is for real, that this hawkish pivot will stay. So has anything changed, and what should investors be on the lookout for next?
So I think you're exactly right. His message has been incredibly consistent, I think, for the last, since the previous FOMC meeting. But the markets seem to not pay any attention to it. And on your program and other programs talking about this, you got to take this guy seriously. And it's, he's not going to just give in. He's not going to pivot. And then, since they weren't taking him seriously, he said, okay, I'm ripping up my speech at Jackson Hole. I'm going to make a short speech. This is one thing over and over again. We're going to keep at it till we're done. And he basically said the same thing today, and the dot plots were revised to be consistent with that.
When it comes to recession risks, they really stop short of saying that the US will fall into a recession. But when you take a look at the labour market outlook, the 0.6 percentage point expectation for the deterioration of the labour market, we've never seen that happen without a recession before. So are we being too optimistic to think that a soft landing is really still on the table?
As I said, I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, it's not impossible, but highly unlikely. There are a lot of shocks that could come in. Unfortunately, a lot of what will happen to the global economy will be decided by Mr. Putin, and obviously that's a real wild card. It's very hard to predict what's going to happen there. But I think, as I mentioned, I think the unemployment rate is likely to go even higher, probably get to a 5 handle. Now, by previous recessions, that wouldn't be so bad. But of course, it's never good to have the unemployment rate going up. But the alternative is even worse, of getting into a late 1970s, early 1980s situation. Remember, the last time inflation was this high, Volcker had interest rates in double-digit levels.
Yeah.
So if we can get away with 4 or 5%, that's not going to be so bad compared to what happened 40 years ago.
You know, Jay Powell said that there was a contingent of people, members of the FOMC, who were pushing for 100 basis point hike today. So we clearly had that hawkishness that you don't necessarily see in the final rate hike. The next meeting is going to be very critical. 2 meetings left this year, and it's going to be right around the midterm elections. How could they do? Would it have been better to do 100 a day so you could pull back to 50 just ahead of the election? Can they do something that aggressive, 75 even, and certainly I guess they'll consider 100, who knows, right ahead of an election? Wouldn't that just have political ramifications or repercussions that might be bad for the Fed?
I think it's better that they are trying to smooth rather than having surprised people with 100 basis points now, because people are going, oh my goodness, things are a heck of a lot worse than we thought. I mean, obviously they're still working it out, as you were discussing. A lot of volatility in the markets today as they're trying to sort of suss out what the inflation risks are, what the recession risks are. And that's going to take a while to work out. Obviously, the meeting that will be just before the midterm election will be politically fraught, but I think better that they just keep a consistent path, a consistent message. They've now laid a very clear foundation for being around 75 basis points for the next meeting, so it's not going to come as an extreme surprise. And I think it's better that they didn't cause too much tumult today, because that would have just gotten a lot of focus on them. They don't want the focus to be on them.